Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Albob. I am your sensei, your griot, here to tell you a story, and don't believe a word I say. And remember, all of you snowflakes, everyone who has a belief and is threatened, intimidated by knowledge and an open mind, you should leave the channel right now, right? Just go on, go away. You're not going to, be able to, really stomach anything I have to say. So, you know, just for your best interest. But all those who are interested in a good story and don't believe a word I say, but open your mind and listen, right?
Hello, everyone. This is Dark Journalist with a very special interview with Oxford scholar and Giza Death Star book series author, Dr. Joseph Farrell. Today, Dr. Farrell will go deep on the covert machinery that allows a whole category of advanced exotic UFO technology to remain behind a wall of secrecy, and how 75 years of CIA obfuscation and political lies have kept the game going right up until today. Have we hit a turning point? Please join us now.
Now, this has a lot to do with the old crone. She's right in the middle of all this. And Archy, great scholar.
Let's track this UFO file through here. We got a big moment in 1947 with the UFO file.
Yes.
Through Kenneth Arnold.
Right.
This brings us also to the JFK assassination, oddly enough. Arnold will have his incredible sightings at Mount Rainier, and those craft are very interesting. You've pointed out before they owe a great resemblance to the work of the Horton brothers.
Yeah.
And they aren't actually
Flying
saucers.
wings.
They look more like boomerangs or
Flying
crests.
Yeah. Big flying wing.
Exactly. And his sighting is legitimate on so many levels because he's actually, the reason he's out there is he's trying to find a transport of Marines in a plane that disappeared a month earlier. And there's actually a reward for it.
Right.
So he has really good reason to be there. When he comes down and he gives this explanation, the whole craze takes off, and there's an incredible wave of sighting.
Right.
One of the things that happens is he gets hired as a private investigator to go down and talk to some people at Maury Island in Washington who have seen a craft that gives off weird slag. These crafts that kind of donut shaped, and they're giving off weird slag. They just ruin a boat, and they kill a dog, and a boy gets burned. Mm-hmm. In the middle of that story is someone named Fred Crispin.
Yep.
And so Fred Crispin is somebody who, kind of jerks around with Arnold through that whole story, takes off to Alaska, and Arnold is left with a very bizarre situation, which he recounts in the only book that he wrote about the whole thing. Later, this very same Crispin is going to be put up as part of this trial assassination of the JFK assassination by Jim Garrison. And Garrison thinks, as he submits to his book publisher, this guy is the one who was involved directly with the shooting. He's a Boeing assassin.
Right.
So that's where he had arrived at. Crispin then connected to this very first UFO case pre Kenneth Arnold, actually pre his sighting. And in that whole, before Roswell and everything else, what are we looking at with Crispin and his connection there to the UFO file and then the assassination?
Well, you're forgetting another important step in the Crispin story, and that is who is taking the report.
Who is taking the report?
For Kenneth Arnold and for Maury Island. Who's covering all of that in 1947? Guy Bannister.
Guy Bannister, exactly.
He's the one filling out the reports on all of these incidents for the FBI, subject matter X.
Yes.
Because he's the special agent in charge. I think he was based in Boise at the time. So in other words, he's the one ultimately, if you're following all of these reports and the flow of information, when the reporters interview Kenneth Arnold, they, in turn, all of that is getting back to Guy Bannister. He's filling out the reports for all of this. And so where does Bannister end up? Why? He ends up in New Orleans. And by the way, let's not forget, what's his name? Kerry, one of Crispin's cohorts, pardon me, ends up in New Orleans as well. And if I'm not mistaken, my memory tells me that at some point, Crispin himself ended up in New Orleans during this, this same whole time period. So we've got this little nest of people that are, Guy Bannister being right at the top of the heap, that are all connected to the issue of UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the big problem with Guy Bannister. When he is summoned to appear before the House Assassinations Committee, kind of like DeMoranshil, he suffers a convenient heart attack.
Right.
And all of his files go missing.
Exactly.
Now, here's a guy that had files out the wazoo, and Bannister strikes me as the kind of character, especially if he's dealing with subject matter X up there in Idaho and Maury Island and Kenneth Arnold and God knows what else he's dealing with related up there. He's the kind of guy that's going to make duplicates.
Yeah.
He's just that kind of guy.
Absolutely.
He's going to make duplicates of.
So you say, Al, Sensei Al, what does that have to do with the old crone? And who is Archy? Where were you on the bob? Well, I met the old crone in 69 and 70, and I was with her in 69, 70. And I met her through Archy, and Archy was a chair at Trinity. He was a psychosocial, cultural, forensic anthropologist. One of my first great mentor teachers. And I went to Ireland to be in the Irish National Theatre. I knew nothing about Irish history or the culture or anything, so they said, "Well, before you do this, you have to go learn about that. So we're going to send you over to Trinity." And so I was sent into this place, and the only place that had a space for me was Archy. Archy had a chair. I mean, he had a whole department, but there was nobody in it because he was searching through the Celts to understand the connection between the Egyptians and the Mesoamericans. Because there were pyramids all over the world on top of ley lines, energetic lines of Gaia. And he was writing all about this before any of the other, gods, must be spacemen books, and all that. And so he was the first guy. And he came from an extraordinarily wealthy family that were really, they were, part of the English aristocracy, right? And so, they were Scottish English guys. They were the guys who, right there when Scotland freedom, were people who were that, but also fronting for Longshanks, right? That whole movie, right? Those guys that Mr. Freedom killed were some of his ancestors. So when that all cooled down and became part of, his family were kings and people who ran Scotland for people like Longshanks, right? And so by the time Archy was born, just before the 20th century, or just after I think he was born in 1910. He was born around the time my mom was born, right? So he was about the age of my mom. But during that period, his father was a diplomat for the English, and so when World War I came, he was 9 or 10, and he was in France, and so he kind of saw all of that. And that's when he bumped into, when he was 9 or 10, into the old crone. who was she tried to join, the English because her family were English aristocracy, and she tried to sent. Archie was English aristocracy centered in Scotland. She was English aristocracy centered in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, right? And in Dublin, right? She grew up in Dublin. Her father was, or grandfather was, like the high whoop-de-doo of the English uh, zippity-doo-dah in, in Dublin. That's where the power center of English domain over Ireland was, right? The industrial center was Northern Ireland, right? And so, because it was just like 15 miles to England, right? It's right just across the little slip, the Irish Sea, or whatever they call that. So, um, that was their connection, and he was a youngster, but very precocious, well read, ahead of his time, and he met the old crone in France, right? She was she went to school in Oxford. She's one of the first women to graduate Oxford's medical school, so she wanted to be a surgeon. And the English kids said, go back and do some knitting, lady. Don't bother us. Very much like the scene out of the first Wonder Woman, when her boyfriend Hero, who brought the Nazis, the Germans into the girls' island, and the girls, put down the Germans, killed all the Germans. Have a big, you know, um, boat with gigantic guns and machine guns, and the girls kill them all with bows and arrows and spears and swords. And the young guy was there. He flew through the clouds to get away from these guys because he had this book of all of the secrets of what the Germans were going to do in World War One. All these nasty new weapons they were going to have. And the Nazis are always getting new weapons because they're coming out. They have been in contact with dimensional forces for a long time, right? And all of that. I mean, the present English family. You take it back to Elizabeth and before Elizabeth and Victoria. All of those folks bumped into guys like Doctor Who. You watch Doctor Who's great because the guys who produced that knew all this stuff that I'm talking about and slip it into their storylines. And so and why do you think people talk about how the late Queen was a reptile? Her eyes would snap into yellow sideband. They blink this way. So so both of these guys, Archie and the old crone, were, their families were part of this. They saw it when they were children, adolescents, young adults, right? And both of them were, in every family, there is somebody who speaks truth to power, who just, is a cheeky monkey, who is a guy like me, lucky bastard, and we all serve love's co-creation and not our family or not ourselves or not the king or not the church or not any of that power structure, that reptilian Piscean age power structure of getting what you want through violence, right? Taking it, right? So, and they were the harbingers of the Aquarian age, right? And so I was born right there at the Aquarian age, right? And I'm an Aquarian. I'm an Aquarian's Aquarian. It can't be any more Aquarian than me. So, I'm one of those first, and they were a lot of, calico kids or whatever they ever call those kids. Let's see, what are people saying? I can't read. Uh, yeah. My friend, if you're chatting, put everything in caps so I can read it. I can't read what you're saying here. So anyway, all the stuff that seems so odd and strange today, starting, let's say, from well, let's say from the Civil War in the United States to today. That is all one movie. That is all one essence of um, a group of what do they call that? Conspiracy. When more than two people come together to do something nefarious and don't tell anybody else, that's a conspiracy, right? And a theory is just, well, this is, what do you think of this? It's not truly proven, right? So that's, and the people, well, that can't happen. There's no such things because, they can't keep a secret. Well, that's not true. The secrets are kept all the time, right? Pretty much every corporation, is a conspiracy theory because they go into the boardroom, close the door, and no one knows what they're talking about. No one knows, the little plans they have of buying this out or starting that war or doing this because they're a private corporation. In the 1870s, there was a congressional law passed that gave corporations the rights of individuals and also proprietorial ownership of things. Meaning, so we're making this and we own it. And we're not even going to patent it. We're just not going to tell you about it. And so that is why all the highest secrets are held by corporations. All the hidden technologies. Between 19, 72, 73, 74, I was out there in the West. I worked at Los Alamos, San Dias, Kirkland Air Force Base, you know, Nullis, you name it, I worked there. And my job was I worked for Dick Powell Electric. And he was like, a New Mexico version of Grandpa Stall, right? It was Grandpa Powell and then Dick. I never understood why people named Richard wanted to call themselves Dick. But anyway, I mean, they don't run into so good, Dick Cheney, Dick Army, Dick Nixon. There are just so many Dicks. And usually they start out pretty good when they're Richard, and then as soon as they become Dicks. So there I was, and what I did, what they hired me for, once they realized what I could do, I first, did a lot of different things, and then I went to different they did large projects like mining and transmission lines and things for the military and dumbs and corporate dumbs and so you know and my specialty was high voltage power sources, transformers, and creating. I was very good at fixing them, so that's kind of what I first did. I did transmission work, and then they sent me off to the uranium mines in the Four Corners, and I worked on Mount Taylor. Mount Taylor was a guy who took the industrial war-making might of the Civil War and turned it on the indigenous people, and that was the Indian Wars, right? That lasted for about 20, 30 years, and they wiped out. We wiped out from the time Chris Columbus came to the time we had the Civil War, let's say. We wiped out maybe, close to 6 million people here in what we call the United States. But in North America, I mean, Christopher Columbus himself wiped out 6 million people in what they called Hispaniola, that's now called Haiti, right? And Haiti is an island, and the San Domingo, where the rich people live, and they don't have the earthquakes, and they don't have the pestilence, and they don't have the gangs, and they don't have the war. They live in quite nice on their gated communities and golf courses, right? But just on the line, Haiti is because Haiti is where. So Chris came in and just cut everything down and grew products that grew there, really sugar and cotton and this new thing called tobacco and coffee and real cash crops, right? They couldn't find any gold, and that was the Spanish, But see, Spanish were looking for gold. They were looking for that city of gold. So they went all over North and South and Central America looking for it. And when they found it, they kind of stayed there. They left priests, But the priests, those Jesuits and Franciscans, were nasty dudes, and killed thousands, and because the Pope said he gave a rule saying that white people from Europe who are Catholic can go and steal everybody else's indigenous people. They're not Christians. Kill them. They're like stepping on an ant. No big deal. God's not unhappy with that, right? And so this is the world we live in today. Right? All these wars are all about resources and power control, right? And it goes to the three legs of the hegemony of the unipolar transnational fascist oligarchy. And those three legs are the Vatican, the city of London, and the District of Columbia, right? Vatican owns your soul and everything within that paranormal, mystery woo-woo kind of world that we call religion, right? City of London controls the money, right? And the District of Columbia is a power center of war, because we first had the War Department, then we had Department of Defense, we had the Pentagon, and these Pentagons are very satanic building, built by Masons, and so is Washington D.C. All the streets are laid out in very Masonic ways, right? All the buildings are very Masonic. You name it, it's going on, and pretty much everybody who's all the senators, congressmen, bureaucrats high up are Masons, right? And so that's the world we live in, and we've been living in it since Babylon. You go read Joseph P. Campbell's, no, Joseph P. Farrell's books, the guy who's talking here, and you will understand what it is. And here's a little bit more of this. This is deep journalist, goes deep journalist. He always has Joseph P. Farrell, Catherine Austin Fitz, the guy who knows everything about COG, continuation of government and DUMS and all that. So he's a really good source. So here's a little bit more of him.
Whoever is writing,
They don't come out for 30 years after the Torbett document.
So the Torbett document referencing these things, and then those transcripts don't come out. So whoever is writing,
They don't come out for 30 years after the Torbett document.
All the stuff.
So the Torbett document has the inside access.
Right.
It's a reflection of that. And let's face it, DISC, when you look into it, it makes sense.
Yeah.
For sure, as a whole NASA security division, and it's headed up by Von Braun. Which also makes sense.
Now, let's look at that aspect of the story, the DISC story, just very briefly. You'll recall in my other books, SS Brotherhood of the Bell, and so on and so forth, Covert Wars, Breakaway Civilizations, and all that, I've pointed out numerous times the same thing that Linda Hunt pointed out in her book about these paperclip Nazis, and that was that after their arrival in this country and their basing in El Paso, Texas, that they appeared to have recreated the entire command structure that they had inside of Nazi Germany. That's number one. Number two, they were driving around in Mercedes automobiles that were quite expensive and beyond the ability of their army salary to support. So in other words, they're getting money from somewhere. And number three, the biggie, is that they have dead drops that they use inside of Mexico.
Oh, wow.
So in other words,
outside of the reach of the United States.
Outside of the reach of the United States. So what happens is the American Army counterintelligence, after the Roswell incident, this is key, after the Roswell incident, reopens the security vetting procedures on most of those Nazis, and guess who's at the top of the list?
Who?
Kurt Davis.
Amazing.
They reopened his file because they learned that he had denounced a colleague of his in 1942 in Nazi Germany to the Gestapo. So they reopened his file. And who is Kurt Davis? Well, Kurt Davis is not a rocket scientist. He's a high voltage discharge and plasma physicist. It is Kurt Davis that is put in charge of the Apollo missions at Cape Canaveral during Project Apollo. That's the head guy.
And they did that because the LEM and the service module were not being propelled by chemical rockets. They had them on there, but they were being propelled by gravomagnetic propulsion, right? And so it was putting a field, and how they were able to, survive the Van Allen belt and all the radiation the sun was giving off was their vehicle was being propelled and protected by this field, right? And that's one reason. I mean, all the stuff you saw in Roddenberry's Star Trek, they had faster than light transportation. They had shields around their ship. They had all kinds of stuff like that, right? Well, that's straight up from these guys, right? So they did go to the moon because the Nazis went to the moon in the 40s. And the Nazis, through Operation Paperclip, are running our government. They didn't just bring in a handful. Von Braun, the nice Nazi. Oh, he wasn't a bad Nazi. Of course he was. His factory making the V2 missile and V1 and the ME-102, because him and Speer built all these factories underground. Once the Allies were bombing stuff, the Nazis were producing more war materials at the end of the war than they did at the beginning of the war, right? And if they could have hung out just a little bit longer, they were building a V3 that could get from Germany to the United States, right? And they had nuclear weapons. They killed 60 million Russian people in less than a year and a half. That's a lot of people to kill with bullets and artillery shells. So they had nuclear. And you go look at Stalingrad and Leningrad and all those cities that they were obliterated. They look worse than Hiroshima, Nagasaki, right? So, and the bomb that we dropped on Hiroshima was a Nazi bomb. The uranium bomb we dropped on Hiroshima or Nagasaki, whichever it was. We had a plutonium bomb and we had a uranium bomb. And the uranium bomb was the bomb that Nazis gave us, right? We painted it gray, got rid of the SWAT stickers on the tail, and dropped that sucker, right? And they also gave us 4 or 5 tons of weapons grade uranium, right? So we could build another 100 uranium bombs, right? They gave them the blueprints, and they gave us a couple of scientists who were the guys who did it for the Germans, right? And after they stayed a while for us, they went down to Argentina. Don't cry for me, Argentina. And they basically built a military industrial complex there, and they also did one in South Africa, right? And the guy that they were talking about, who was running Apollo, when he retired from NASA, he went and ran this Torbit report. The top that you hear about, Blue Book and a few other things. The military was looking at flying saucers, but the real deal, right? The men in black come out of this Torbit report, right? And if you go check out the one really good source The one clearinghouse is Dark Journalist. Used to be Art Bell, but then the moron took over. What's his name? Whatever his name is. The guy who sings and dances, and used to be, he's a TV news guy, and before he did that, he was in naval intelligence. Pretty much, whenever you see any people in the media, if you look at the pedigree where they came from, they usually go back to naval intelligence, and the naval intelligence runs ONI, Office of Naval Intelligence, and other things, and intelligence wise, spooky stuff wise, they're miles ahead of CIA and the NSA because they've been doing it, like since but somewhere between the War of 1812 and we've always had a navy. Even when before we had an army, we had a navy. So and they had an Office of Naval Intelligence. So um, these are things you go check out. And the Naval Office of Naval Intelligence puts out a great journal called Proceedings or Proceedings or something like that. And it's very akin to what McGraw Hill publishes. McGraw Hill published a lot of these special journals, and the best, the one I always loved, was Aviation and Space Weekly because they put down everything that everybody, what the Russians were doing there, but and you didn't need intelligence. You just need a copy of that magazine to see what everybody was doing. I mean, they really, because the Russians gave us all the information we gave the Russians because they were our from the Russian Revolution, from Marx, that whole communism thing was a straw dog brought to us by good old what's his name, Rothschild. He went off and got Marx and Engels out of out of German jail, brought them to London, put them in a really fancy house, paid their bills to the day they die, and that's when they wrote Das Kapital. And so that whole thing was what is known as the loyal opposition, all during the Cold War. We were so. Our friend here asked me about what about the Ukraine war. Well, again, that's another straw dog. That is to distract us from, we hear about global warming, oh, our footprint, blah, 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 right? Well, in reality, what's going on is the Earth, it's the closest thing to this is this thing called Earth changes, right? If you go watch a movie that Whitley Strieber and Art Bell wrote, first they wrote a book and then they made the movie called The Day After Tomorrow. That is what's kind of occurring because real Earth scientists who go and measure the Earth, right? When there's a volcano going off, you'll find Earth scientists there, right? There are tsunamis and earthquakes, you'll find Earth scientists. When you guys who are up there on the poles, the North and South Pole, Antarctica, they are digging into the ice, way down deep, and they're taking out these ice cores, and there are little bubbles in there, and those little bubbles represent what the world was when that ice was formed, like 6 million years ago or a billion years ago. I mean, they can see what was going because those little bubbles have parts of the atmosphere. The atmosphere shows what was going on. What the sun was doing, what because it affects the chemicals in the atmosphere, what the Earth was doing, what kind of volcanoes were going off because when Krakatoa happened in the 18 whatevers, right? It threw so much shit up into the upper atmosphere. It created what we call a nuclear winter. Like when you have more than 10 nuclear weapons go up at the same time, it throws so much shit up in the air. Yes, it's radioactive, but it puts particles way up there and it blocks out the sun, which causes, the sun not to hit the plants so the plants don't grow. So we have a year, 2, 3, 4 of no food. And that's a nuclear winter. Yes, people die of the radiation poisoning, but not as many as those who starve to death, right? So there was a big, gigantic volcano in Krakatoa, and you know, there are reports in the newspaper where the Thames in London freezes in July and August. Right? What the frack? Well, that's because there's so much shit up in the air that it's like nighttime all the time for a year and a half, and it gets cold. Because the only reason, pretty much, Ireland, England, Scotland, and all the countries like Norway and Denmark and Sweden and Switzerland and France and Germany and everything up to around Italy, all the mountainy guys would freeze to death. The only thing that keeps them alive is what is known as the African train. That is the warmness of the Pacific and Africa come into the Atlantic, right? Right as the Wayward Islands, and then kind of go across Brazil, and then go across Central America, and go into the Gulf of Mexico, and then come up the East Coast and go across into Europe. When I lived in Ireland, I lived on the West Coast. It was like living in Florida. It never went below 60. The the Ring of Kerry, these four, five, six peninsulas that stuck out into the Atlantic, um, that they were like a bathtub. We used to go there and just hang on the beach, live there, right? Because it was so nice, and it never really on the West Coast. It rained all the time, but not much, right? Most of the time, it was sunny, right? And from Limerick to Galway, and they had palm trees, right? Coconuts would go into the ocean and float across and go onto the beach, and there were palm trees, right? And so, what causes that is kind of between South Carolina and Iceland and Greenland. There's this part of the Atlantic where the salt is extraordinarily intense, right? And it causes between the gravity and the heat that's coming through, it causes a swirl, and it's called the train, the North Atlantic train, bringing the African belt up into Europe, right? And as all this ice and permafrost and everything is melting in Iceland and Greenland and things further north, at Gordon Shelf, that's the size of Texas, and that's melting like, it's about to all the whole shelf is about to slide into the Atlantic. And when that happens, first of all, there's going to be a flood like no one, people go, well, the oceans are going to rise the next 100 years by about 2 meters. And when this shelf slides into the Atlantic, you're going to have an immediate, like 5 days. In 5 days, you'll go from whatever it is to about 20 meters above that, right? So all of the East Coast, all of the Atlantic coast of the United States will be flooded. I mean, nothing, and it's not going away, and it will be flooded all the way up to where the Appalachians start to go up. Now, up in New York State, where you drive over the George Washington Bridge towards Bear Mountain. So the height of Bear Mountain and all of that neck of the woods, because that's basically the Appalachian Mountain Range, right? It goes all the way up to Canada, and on a little further below, like in Pennsylvania, you still have the Blue Ridge. So up until those mountain ranges, all of that's going to be flooded. New York City, Boston, everything, anything below 200 meters is going to be, you know, underwater for a long time, right? Until that all that water moves and goes someplace and it freezes, because that's how we got the geography we have today. And that is the things that Archie was studying, right? And he was finding evidence about it, especially when he was poking around, the pyramids all over the world, right? And he got so much crap for that because he had evidence of, the connection of the Egypt, of the pyramids in Egypt and different parts all over Africa, because Egypt is Africa, and you know and all across the world on these ley lines because these pyramids were energy generators and weapons, right? Yeah, so the guy who did Star Wars, right? He sat at the feet of Joseph Campbell for a whole year and wrote down everything. And Joseph was telling him the extra parts of his great book, The Myth of the Hero, right? And so Lucas just took notes and then went back and made the Star Wars trilogies right? And so everything that happened in Star Wars actually frigging happened, right? And the United States, or not the United States, Earth was Tatooine, right? And also, one side of the Earth was Tatooine, and the other side was the place where Yoda was hanging out, just gooky, you know, muddy, whatever you call that. And so, and this is before, and that asteroid that hit Earth was a weapon that hit Earth, meaning they had the powers to throw asteroids around. And the asteroid belt was made when the first big war, and they used these pyramids as energy weapons. They blew up a whole planet, just like the Death Star. And the moon is a Death Star, right? It's an artificial object. Now, this is all the stuff that Archie was writing about, publishing. He had a lot of money. He could publish his own book. He didn't care. And but the guys like the morons from the the Egyptian guy who's head of you know, the Egypt world over there at the Valley of the Kings, he really hated Archie and did everything he could to like diss him. And but every time they needed Archie, they kind of pull him out because they would find real, still active technology. The things that were what Tesla was working on, and things like the Rainbow Project and Philadelphia Experiment and the Disk Project and Looking Glass. These were all working um, apparati that was kind of left over from this culture. And Archie had been studying it his whole career, right? He had all the money. He could go do he didn't have to. See, that's the thing about people. Well, all these scientists and groups and blah, blah, blah. We have to let the corporations rule because they have the money, blah, blah, blah. And that money that they have is to control, right? And so why don't we, once somebody discovers something like Tesla, why isn't it brought out to the betterment of the world? Why is only certain parts of it brought to make money for the corporations? Because that's what they're up for. You know, what fascism is we have capitalism. That's when capital controls the political structure. Communism is when the political structure controls the economics. Fascism is when the corporations are the government. And that's where we are today. And it's a planetary thing. And they're trying, so they control everything. They own everything. And they manifest these wars all across the world, to make money or to get, access to resources or people or whatever they want. And you control food, you control water, you control air, you control religion, you control the political structure, you control the media, which involves the education structure. That is the media also. Anyway, so you watchdog journalists, man, these guys, I tell you a story, they go straight to the bone, right? So the war in Ukraine is the vehicle that they're going to, illuminate and push forward a further motif of that unipolar, transnational, fascist corporate oligarchy. Right? So, very misogynistic. We're heading towards what was that movie where the girls wore the red coats and the Nuns Habits. Hulu made a TV show out of it. That's where we're heading, you know. And a good, the shot across the bow is what the Supreme Court did to Roe, right? And if you read the bill that they passed through Congress to protect marriage, it's not going to really protect gay and transgendered folk. Sorry, go read it. Right? So it was just a ploy to get people to go back to sleep. Right? Because when Roe happened in the '70s, I was a lesbian and I was a feminist, and hung out with the girls. They loved me. I was the best lesbian they knew. I I had I was a lesbian with special tools, right? And I was at this conference up in Seneca. They were like trying to breathe life back into the women's movement from Seneca because that's where the women's movement started. And those ladies were all of nonviolent politics did not come from Gandhi. It came from the women in Seneca who gathered there like in the 1820s and said, "We're slaves, we're it's all, so we live in a big house, so the master fucks us all the time, but he fucks the slaves too. So we're slaves. We have no rights, we have no ownership, we can't say anything, we can't do anything we want, we can't do anything with our bodies." And that's like the word fuck. That word fuck? That's actually a literal political word. Fuck. Fornication under church and king, right? In Europe, under the Vatican, they had this papal, bull that stated that the Pope and the king in whatever country they were in could not, where their office was, where they had a satellite office, the representatives of the Pope or the king could go into anyone's house and have sex with any woman they wanted, or boy, or animal, or whatever, right? And that's still where we are. We're fucked. So when you're fucked, that's what it means. Fornication under church and king, right? You're fucked. Sorry. So, let's see. This is 47 minutes, and I still haven't really gotten to the place where the old crone and my teacher went on the bop. So, but it's a long time getting there because all of this stuff is interconnected, and so the war in the Ukraine is just another motif. The only difference is we no longer in the Piscean age. We are in the Aquarian age, 100 friggin' percent. And there is no the powers that shouldn't be. They know because when we went into Iran in '91, it wasn't to get them out of Kuwait. Kuwait was part of Iran when the Balfour Declaration was written, and they like sliced up the world. That was part of not Iran. Iraq was part of Iraq, and there was another little part of it that was part of Iran, right? And that's what the Iran-Iraqi was over, right? That little part. And when we went into, um, you know, Iraq to get Saddam out of Kuwait, it was always part of Iraq. And BP did this in the late '40s, '50s. In the '20s, or early 1890s, sliced everything up the way it was, and that's what World War One was about. It was about crushing um, the Persian Empire. It wasn't really the Germans were allies, right? But they were the junior partners of this thing of World War One, and Persian was the power. They had the money, they had the power, they had the politics, right? And Germany had the technology. And where to get the money to build that technology? The Persians. And for Mr. Rothschild's little plan of world domination, he tried to coerce the Persians into that, but they said, no, we've been around way before you, Charlie. So forget about it, right? So that's why we had World War I, right? And that's why the what happened in Bosnia Herzegovina was done, and that's why we got Yugoslavia, and that's why we had the war in Yugoslavia, right? But we went into Iraq because the French and the English had a geological discovery, and pulled up. They went into an underground pyramid, a pyramid that really big pyramid that was still frigging working, and all the apparatus was still frigging working. And they had found a few others, but not like this one, because what they found was what um, this oligarchy was trying to do at the Rainbow Project in, as Preston Nichols' book about the Montauk Project. That was called the Rainbow Project. And they had taken that ancient technology and they were trying to back, and the Nazis were there with them there in Montauk, the paperclip kids. And they were trying to make an apparatus that could go through time and space and could have real time actualization of that. Now there's a TV show called The Time Tunnel, right? Really. And if you take, the Michael Crichton book about, the Andromeda strain and take the TV show Time Tunnel, bingo, that's what you got, right? And there was another great 1970s show called Super Train about this ancient um, transportation tunnel underground. You get in a tube and zip from here to there, like in minutes, right? And that's what Elon Musk is doing, right? He's bought the tunneling apparatus from the Air Force that they built all their dumbs with, and he is building this transportation system, right? Now, Elon Musk isn't doing this. He's just the poster boy of all this. Just like Bill Gates, he's dumber than a doorknob. He is none of these guys invented anything. They just are a poster boy of Mr. Rothschild and his ilk, because Rothschild is just an individual, very powerful, probably one of the most, but there are entities above Rothschild. He's married into them, and so that's why he's kind of reptilian. And so did certain political, families marry into them, and that's why they're reptilian. They're trans human. They've gone past that point of being a reptile. And when you were, Homo sapien sapien reptile, um, it extended your life. I mean, all those, you go to the Old Testament and you go to Kings and they talk about all these guys who are like 19,000, 20,000, 60,000, half million years old. How did they, they weren't like us, that have a limited, your Sensei Bob here, I definitely have a limited, warranty, right? And, after dying in 2014, and, they said, okay, you've done a great job. You're really doing, you got 89% done. And you've been doing it great. We're really proud. We're really happy, but, you got another 11%. Because I was ready to, hang my boots up and eat birthday cake for the rest of eternity. And they said, you're going to get bored with that. That little cardboard hat on your head, and you'll get bored with that. But go back, finish up that 11%. You'll be able to take a baby step in ascension. Okay. All right, all right, all right. I'll go back. Bang! I'm back, and I'm on a gurney being wheeled into a operating room where they're going to crack my chest, do a quadruple bypass, and cut my legs off. Whoa, whoa, whoa! What are you doing? And I sat up. I'm like Chatty Cathy's eyes popped open, and I still had the needle in my arm with the fentanyl going. I mean, I had enough juice in me. I should, they juice you up so much to keep you right on the edge of death, right? So you don't wake up. They don't want you to wake up when they got your chest opened up and they got your heart, and you're stuck to all these machines. No, they don't want you to wake up, right? That'd be very upsetting. So just, I'm in the hallway. I'm going from the ICU into the operating room, and I wake up, and the guy pushing the gurney, He shits in his pants and runs away. The woman wets herself. The nurse, she runs, she's like, she don't run away. She's just like, like seeing a ghost. But the doctor who's in charge, the drug guy, and in an operating room, the guy gets paid the most. The guy is really in most, the surgeon is more like just, doing body work. He's like straightening out this or, putting a few screws into that or, putting a hose clamp over here. Not the smartest, back in the day, surgeons were the lowest, low, right? And so, and that's why they were barbers. My grandfather was a barber surgeon, and that's what a barber pole is. It's white and red. It twirls around. What it was the barbers, they cut you up, slice this off, take care of that part of cancer, blah, blah, blah. And then bandage you up. And then once you were kind of starting to heal, that's before they realized they could sew you up like a pair of pants. And, they would, those bandages, they reuse them again. They washed them and they hung them up on a line. They still had blood on it. So that's why the barber pole is it is, because it represented, it was a logo, the trademark of the barber surgeon, right? So, and that's why a lot of barbers today, you go around and they're really, really super duper all about cleanliness and hygiene. And we're like an operating room because they're barber surgeons, right? Back up until the 50s, they still did take warts off and, do stuff until the AMA. All this stuff's interconnected. That's the interesting thing about all this. There is no separate entity, it's all interconnected. Has been for the last 60 million years. Right? And if you take it like Joseph Campbell and Lucas took it, you can, all of that you saw in Star Wars and still see is, and Disney is part of the, Disney, the brothers were Masons. They were part of secret society. You go to um, Orlando Disney, and they have a spatial room called Room 33, where only Masons can go in. And they do ceremony in there, right on the frigging campus of Florida Disney, because there's so many children. There's so many open, energetic sources there. I got arrested in Orlando Disney back in the 70s. A friend of mine tried to kill himself a number of times. He's a really handsome guy, great artist. He was going to go someplace, but every time, he got a leg up and had a show, and they were buying his paintings. He'd get drunk and diss everyone. He couldn't help it. He just had such self-loathing, and so then he wanted to kill himself, and he couldn't even do that, right? So he went from being a really handsome guy, really talented, to being, a guy who looked like Quasimodo. I mean, all the muscles, he took all these pills and it really screwed up the muscles in his face. Tried it again, it screwed up a few organs. So, he didn't smell too good. He took it again and it gave him a seizure of sorts, but really it was just an electrical overload in his nervous system. So he had tics. So his face looked like Quasimodo, didn't smell too good, and he had all these tics, right? So, and that time I went to see him I came back and I went to see him and I said, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "Well, I did want to die." I said, "Listen, how long have you known me?" "I don't know, 15 years." I said, "Right. You came from, where'd you come from? Wyoming, Idaho, someplace like where, out there in the middle of nowhere." And he learned from his mother how to paint, and he was really good at it. And he was really handsome. He went to college, went to Cal Arts, and then he went to New York School of Artists, and that's kind of where I met him. And he had it in him to be a great artist, but he emotionally didn't have it in him to wheel and deal and schmooze and do all that stuff, right? And he couldn't do what Andy Warhol did and just make a persona and hide behind it. He would get drunk and tell people if someone's spending 50 to 100 grand on a painting of yours, you don't want to tell them what a low life scumbag moron they are. They may be, but you don't tell them that, right? So anyway, I said, "Gary, So how long have you known me? And he said 15 years. And so what? You have not left New York in those 15 years. What do I do all the time? Well, you get a gig, you work real hard, you make a big fist of money, and then you go someplace for you know 2 months to 2 years, and then you come back and you do it again. You do it again. And in that period of time, you're here for anywhere from 4 or 5 months to almost a year, and then you do all these amazing things with us, and you start us, you push us into something, and then you go away, and then you come back and see how it is. You water it, you plant it, you prune it, and then you go away, and that's what I did. Right? I mean, I could have been a leader of all kinds of things. I could have been world famous. I could have been that A list. I was above A list. A-listers come to a party or an event or something, and they have to dress up and put on a front to show. Me, I would go looking like this, and that was okay. I mean, people expected me to look like this, right? And people still do, right? And people still take care of me. And this is what I want to say. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and thank you for taking care of me. I've been doing this show for now almost 4 years, if not. And I've had a PayPal, which I still have. And you guys always send me money um, right when I need it. And right now, out here in the woods, right? Winter is upon us. In a few days, we will go from fall into real winter. I think it's the 21st. And today, I think, is the 15th or 14th or some, I forget what day it is out here. Soon it'll be the 21st and it'll be winter. So far, the fall has been very habitable, right? And if the winter can be as habitable as this, I'll be okay. And I have a little bit of heat. I have electricity, and I like wrap myself up in the electric blanket. And about I don't know how many days ago, it was cold. It's like 29 at night and 40 something during the day, and that's kind of wintry weather here. Average wintry weather, right? When it's really bad wintry weather is when it's 29 degrees during the day and like 18 degrees below zero at night. And that's when it's dangerous for me. That's when I can die, right? Because right now I'm just rejiggering my homeostasis. I went off to the unmentionable one's family's house and had Thanksgiving with them, and they're really nice people. The unmentionable one, plays his family to be, baby eating, satanic creatures of ilk, but they're not. They're your average, you know, 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s American family. 89% of them of the time, they're fun, they're nice, they're good, they're generous, they're pleasant, right? They're good parents. Try and watch out for their kids, take care of them, et cetera, right? They hit, in America, if you figure something out you want to do and no one else is doing it, and you do it well, you're going to be successful. You can't, you know, be above monetary success. Can't really have real freedom. You have to toe the line because the more that kind of success, you have to spend that money keeping up with the Joneses, right? So, but I went to their house for Thanksgiving, and they are your basic Italian Irish family, right? And so, came from I came from a German Italian Irish family, right? And so they're just Irish Italian family. And so, Daddy is Irish, and he's got a lot of issues. And his father's very authoritarian, and he went off to Vietnam. John's, the unmentionable one's father went to Vietnam, and has pretty serious PTSD. Did nothing with it but drink, and then put all his energy into making money. He was a school teacher, and he drank. Then he bought a house, and then he bought another house. He was still a drunk. Bought another house, and his wife said, we stop being drunks, we can really do something because she's a real go-getter, right? He's very meticulous, kind of strategic. She is like just hits the ground running and gets shit done, right? So that was the house I was in for 4 days, or 4 nights and 3 days, and they shared their Thanksgiving with me. And And the mom is unbelievable. She, her mother was a world famous artist, and her father was a world famous jazz musician. Then he went to college and became an engineer, and he built skyscrapers all over New York City and the United States and little parts of other parts of the world. But his Rue des Monts was the building of the United Nations building on Second Avenue. So she was competing against those two, which is kind of she shouldn't have. She should have just been herself, but she was so that kind of burnt. That was her PTS burning herself out. So she's always has to like and it's amazing she's still alive. So she cooked like you couldn't believe. Every Italian stuffed shells, you name it, she did it right. And she had she's a real amazing baker, and so they made she made every kind of Italian um, pastry there was, and then these kind of sugar cookies that are like meringues, right? And in the meringues there are fruit and sweet things, and there are other ones that have fruit, nuts, and savory things. They're almost like you know Chinese buns, but they're meringues. They're hard sugar. They're like you know meringue. And she made hundreds of them and put them on plates and put them all over the house. So whatever chair you sat in, there was a plate, right? And she had bottles of all the great Italian um, liqueurs, like my favorite, anisette and lemon jello, right? So everywhere I looked, there were bottles of anisette lemon jello, a pot of espresso. She took the espresso machine, made espresso, and then put it into a nice little kind of thing that held a gallon of this stuff and kept it at the perfect temperature. And whipping cream. I mean, it was like unbelievable. And the first day I went in there. She loves sweet stuff, so I brought her, a box of candy and two of those Christmas plants because when I went to Kroger's and got gas and I went and spent some last money I had to buy stuff like that. And everything, those big Christmas plants, those red Christmas plants, instead of costing $20 like they do now at Walmart's, they were $6 a piece. I bought two of them, right? Two nice big ones. And I bought this, nice sampler of candy. And I went and she had her um, Christmas thing on the dining room table, and she was getting ready to start putting stuff on it. But her husband was home, and she was out running around. And so I put the two plants on either side of that dining room table, and I went and got a silver tray and took the sampler out of the box and put them there between it, right? And so when she came in, she, oh, look at this, Santa's been here, it's me. So yes, I brought this for you. And so she was like, wow, and she kind of what she did was she took little silver things and put 4 or 5 little candies and spread them around the house. So she didn't have to go just there to eat them. And that's what, she lives on this kind of stuff. And she left the plants there for 2 days. But when she was getting ready to put out the spread, she took the fancy Christmas tablecloth off. And so she took one of my plants and put it right where all her plants were. And it was right in the sun. It looked beautiful. Right. The other one she put over in her studio, which is like the sitting room, and wasn't quite in the direct sunlight. Right. So anyway, I um, kind of said okay, and so that's when she started laying the food out, like 2 days before Thanksgiving. Right. So you could just nosh, and she didn't sleep. So all this food, all this stuff was all around for 3 days and 3 nights and 2 days. No, 3 days, a good 3 days. And so I said, no, I'm not going to. I can't eat that. I got to be good. I've been great for got home this homeostasis thing. My body's in great shape for being dead. I need to, not eat this. I ate one of those little cookies like 2 days before Thanksgiving, and that was it. Just kept nibbling away. Not like, wasn't gorging, you know, wasn't binging, but, I just steadily was nibbling away. And so when I, left them and I tried to see John, and that was, please. I mean, go back 10, 20 shows, and I got, I showed up. He said, for the whole time, thanks. I said, John, come down. You got a room here. You know, you can enjoy your family. That we're having fun. Come down. No, no, come up. Don't be with them. They're evil. They're terrible. Oh, come up. Come. Thanksgiving Day, he blew up my phone. He filled my, he put like 100 text messages, right? He put like 100 emails. Went on and on and on. I could see why this old lady is like had it with him, right? And I just ignored it. I let my phone get to the point where it couldn't, receive anything anymore. Just ignored it. I turned it off. I ignored it. Right? I didn't really see how much. Once it was like bing, 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 I just turned it off. Right? And but every so often I would leave him a text or get him on the phone because I called me. You gotta go out now. I said, no, John, you come down. It's my car won't even make it up there. You got that nice car your parents gave you. It's like the fifth car your parents gave you. Come on down, be part of this. It's loads of fun. And he didn't show. So all a day and a half after Thanksgiving, I was getting ready to leave. And he said, come up, come up, come up. He left a ton of texts. So I said, okay. And driving around a month before, I was behind a dump truck, and stone fell out off the back tread of it and bounced on the road. And one little thing, ding, hit my windshield, but it just made a little ding. But riding up to the road to John's, that little ding went into a crack, went across my windshield. I was okay. And so that was like a harbinger. So he had left the downstairs door unlocked. I went in. He had the heat pump rumbling, but it doesn't cool. The only way the thing can heat anything is if the wood stoves are working. If you got them cooking, the heat pump just kind of circulates that heat around, and it's a big stone concrete building, so. And there's two wood stoves that are right where the mass of that heat and stone are. George was smart. You heat, you put a wood stove, you put a couple of logs in the wood stove. Every 2 hours, it heats the whole 2 logs every 2 hours, heats the building. And once it gets to a certain temperature, you don't have to eat one log every 4 hours. Keeps that place like in the 60s, right? John, the unmentionable one, he spends, I don't know, 1,000 to 2,000 a month for electricity to heat that place, and it really is. And if you're in that place and you wear pants, you wear socks, you wear a sweater, you wear a jacket, you wear a hat, and then and the place is relatively warm, right? But he wants to run around in his hot pants and barefoot, right? And a t-shirt that shows off his breasts. He wears a nice tube top, right? And has whatever color hair he has at this moment. So, since we're talking about the unmentionable one, let's go see what he's put up, what's on his channel. And again, all of this stuff is interconnected. As I said, the unmentionable one is a basic canary in a coal mine. He's a canary in Homo sapien sapien coal mine of what's going on. You want to see what's going on? You look at that. And so he only has on his channel 6 years ago, 14 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 2 years ago, and then you go to his uh, favorites, most watched, and they're all of me telling a story. And they're all in the 40 to 100,000 K, right? And he's never So that's John's Christmas song. See why I call him the canary in the coal mine, because it's like that's what's going on in the Ukraine and Russia war right there. What John was just, I mean, people, why do you even have anything to do with that guy? Well, first of all, he's my friend. I don't give up on friends. There's a really good core of goodness inside that guy, right? There's a lot of talent in that guy, but he does stuff like that, which in a lot of ways is unbelievably great, but most people can't understand it. Don't understand the metaphor, don't understand. He doesn't even understand it. He just does it. He like channels and stuff because he's got so many entities inside of him. And I said, John, all you have to do is swipe them out. They have no hold of you. Just don't, because everyone has bad thoughts. Everyone thinks like that. But if you meditate, pray, and when you feel the little squirrel twirling the metal cage, you just like, nope. And you say a prayer. It's all it takes, really. And then you do your best. You don't try. See, John just tries. I mean, he made 3 films, and he accomplished them. But you can see by watching them, it's quite amazing that he made, full length films, beginning, middle, end. But he basically was so, like that. Um, he let all of those creatures inside to, and that's what he propelled as his mother propels herself with cigarettes and, sweets. And she cuts down, otherwise she'd be dead. And her dad, he used to propel himself with alcohol, but he's pretty much on that. But he still, those 4 evenings and 3 days I was there. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't want to use my car. Didn't have money for gas. You know, I went out one day, Friday, to try and run some errands, and nobody was open. Everything was closed. So we just, went to a couple places that were my haunts. They were happy to see me. They bought me lunch. People sat and talked, and then I did a show from one of them. And but when I talked to the unmentionable one's dad, he, 89% he was, interesting. We could talk about stuff, and it was good. 11% pretty much, horrors of Vietnam PTSD, and that's when he acts out, right? And he acts out like he's drunk. I don't think he does drink anymore, but he acts out like he's drunk. And you can have that kind of chemistry in your body when cortisol takes over, and when you have the adrenaline of your PTSD going, it manufactures the cortisol, and the cortisol can affect your brain, especially if you've been drinking for many years and you're an alcoholic. And even though you're not drinking, you can still have those breakouts of acting that way, right? You're not drinking, but Anyway, so that was my observation. So I knew this family. I've known John 7 years ish. So I got to know them. They would come up and visit. We go visit them, but I didn't stay with them in total. 4 days and live there and sleep on the couch and that kind of stuff. Right. And I watched all of their whatever. So all of the stuff that the petty things that people do, families do to each other on holidays. Well, they did that, but you know, only for about 11% of the time. The rest, I mean, my family could get into a Jaguar. That's all they did. That's my grandma was the youngest. When I was like, I electrocuted my mom 3 different times before the age of 6 months. So grandma took me away. So see how all this stuff's interconnected, right? So good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Here we are, 1 hour, 20 minutes, and 20 seconds into the show. I love when that happens. And I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank everyone who has in the past put something in PayPal. Now, no one's put anything. Here it is, the season of holidays and giving and sharing. I haven't seen anything in the old PayPal. I've checked it out. It seems like it's still working. So please, come on. The dude awake 42 at Gmail. Dude awake 42 at Gmail. Go to, I don't do this show to get you to give me money. I only need money when I don't have any, and want me to drive here to be able to do this. I need a little something, something. And in the last weeks of the month is when I have nothing, and then the first week of I have very little, right? And it isn't until the mid of the second week that my Social Security comes in. So end of it, end of the month, not so much. I have maybe $20 to $100 in my checking account, and I don't spend that. That's like I need to keep that account open, just in case I might need $50. But my PayPal is my pillow. And usually in that, you guys would be sending me something on the order of, 70 bucks to a couple hundred every month, right? And that was just that enough to be able to live on 400 bucks a month, right? Meaning I would have 400 plus a pillow of somewhere between, 100 bucks and 150, or maybe sometimes more. But I haven't really seen anything in almost a month and a half, right? Haven't, early November, I got something for $17 from this guy who pretty much religiously sends me 17 bucks, right? And he has nothing, right? So if he doesn't send me anything, he's really hurting. So I send him prayers, right? And let's see if I can. He's one of the cadre, not cadre. He's one of the adepts. He's someone who got a hold of me, and I talked to him on the phone. And so that's John's Christmas song. It's mind-boggling. Oh, holy moly! Oh, what am I doing? I am doing this. Going out in the public would be good for you, buddy.
No.
Will humans matter in the future?
Science. This is what it is all about. Nathan Sprague is a professor of computer science at James Madison University.
And it started out was, "Hey, how you doing?" And wasn't really, in a negative tone. And I'm still not in a negative tone because you're my friend. I care about you, and I'm just, I
came to be known remains the deadliest attack in British history.
And I said, this is the fuel. This is the darkest point of the relationship.
Their relationship. Talk to me about them together. Like, how did you?
creosote, Mr. Creosote.
Only sites. A few football games and soap operas.
John Papers, whistleblower, author of the Dunes.
In the unsettled period a century ago,
Going on to public would be good for you, buddy. Do I want to what? Well, I would have loved to stay there 2 weeks ago when I was there and all ready to stay at the house. But now I'm kind of dug in and I have doctor's appointments and I have no money and my car is, it's okay. But really, I couldn't, come until I have no idea when I could come. Definitely not like today or tomorrow, or because it's supposed to start snowing tomorrow night, and I wouldn't be able to. And it hasn't. Physically, I have a doctor's appointment. That's what prayer does. It's like all around, but it hasn't. That's really my position. He's actually stayed warm. I was ready to stay there 2 weeks ago, and but it was great that I came back because it was warm, and I fixed things and got ready for winter, and when usually it's colder than it has been up until now, so hopefully the rest of the winter might be as warm as it has been, and that would be great. I would like, yes, thank you, global warming. Thank you, Jesus. So anyway.
If there's global warming and it got warmer and it was like it didn't feel as cold.
But John, global warming. Will humans matter in the future? And it started out was, "Hey, how you doing?" And
Came to be known remains.
And I said, this is the fuel.
Their relationship. Talk to me about them together. Like,
so both external perceptions of
what I was changed, and that started to shape sort of my internal perceptions. So both 3/5 and After the Lights Go Out are not a
Anniversary by doing something extremely rare. So a major area.
Well, I can't find.
Massachusetts has one of the country's most restricted coastlines, much of it privately owned down to the low tide line, or controlled by coastal towns that charge non-residents much higher fees for entry.
Sounds like
or ban
Florida.
them outright. Wealthy shoreline communities in New Jersey and around Chicago have faced criticism for similar practices. Off the coast of Massachusetts, on the island of Martha's Vineyard, reached most often by ferries like this one. The routes.
Yeah, it's America. Rich, own, control. You're a slave, right? So, but that still doesn't mean you can't send your Sensei Al Bob some money and PayPal, right? Come on, PayPal, please. Come on, need it. And that's the dudewake42@gmail. You want to get a hold of me on my email, dudewake42@gmail, all lowercase, all together. dudewake42@gmail, right? And my my adepts, my Padawan, my students, they came to me, right? I didn't go to them. I mean, I'm coming to you here on the old YouTube, but they came to me on my email. And they all had real issues, right? And I helped them get through those. And then we went into, because they were they had hit bottom to the point where they, you know, had no idea what, you know, they were suffering, they were miserable, and and the unmentionable one is a good example of that. He is, hit bottom, but he is comfortable at the bottom, right? He's comfortable being possessed by demons. Um, he's comfortable, you know, causing misery for those who love him. Right now, I care for him. Don't love him because I don't have a biological need, like being a parent or a brother or sister or someone married to them or his children. All these people have uncles, aunts, all these people have biological connection to him. I have none. The unmentionable one to me is a character. He's a character actor, right? As I was a sociologist, right? Social scientist, to take myself out of the emotional connection to what I was observing. I had to, set up parameters. And so John is a person, back in the day when I did stories on his channel, because I had no idea about YouTube. I knew nothing. I mean, I left the computer world after Christine Barton, the smartest person in the world, person who wrote the first software to enable computer graphics to be economically feasible. Her PhD thesis was the lamp in Pixar's movies, right? And she did that, changed the world. Guys like Rudd Etcher Synthesizer, it was an analog device that made digital imagery, right? And it was like, please. It was a digital, it was either way. It was however you go look that up. That was the first kind of digital video synthesizer, but it was such a Rube Goldberg. And I knew those guys really well through Christine because the brains behind it was Louise Etra, um, Bob's wife, right? And we were, Christine, Louise, and I were the dynamic duo in 1970, whatever that was, 2, 3, 4. Whenever I was out there at Xerox Park, and Christine was at Stanford, and then I met Christine again in New York in early '80s, and she was working for GE. And she had a number of amazing projects, and she was digitizing their everything, right? And they were paying her pretty well, but I mean, she was making a system that was worth billions, and she was probably making six figures, right? And gonna get a nice. She got a nice bonus to start. They got her a nice place to live. Um, they gave her a whole department, and everyone's so incompetent that she did everything herself. And then I went to a party, and there she was, right? And we kind of, and she looked a lot different because she looked like college girl, kind of, you know, she was not doing well with humans. Um, but now she had gone through enough iterations of her career. I mean, she started NYT, New York Institute of Technology, right? She started SIGGRAPH, a special interest computing graphics group of the IEEE. She was the first woman to be on the top board of that entity, and she started this thing called SIGGRAPH. Go look up SIGGRAPH, right? She started that individually. And then she brought her buddies like Louise and a few others, and did that. She started the New School's computer graphic school. That's out of that came SIGGRAPH, right? And that came out of NYT. And NYT gave birth to the genetics project that mapped the genome at Brookhaven, and she was involved with that. She devised a machine. You see some pictures of them doing the testing with the pipettes, and this robot arm does like 50 shots at one time, and then this, and so instead of doing it one person at a time, she invented that. Plus, she wrote the software and she invented a number of sensors that didn't have to use X-rays and crook and lima beam, and the woman who invented all that, who didn't get the Nobel Prize, who died from the X-ray exposures, um, Christine read all her work and devised this digital device that did the sensor. And the sensors that she developed are now the base of that technology. Is all that, like when you put your finger in that little thing and it tells your oxygen level. When there are a lot of devices now, like they have blood sugar devices that do a similar thing, right? And so the sensors that she devised for this robot that was going to run the algorithm that was going to. So instead of taking the 20 years that the moron who got the grant for $1 billion to do this, so after getting ripped off so many times, Christine, was involved in starting NYT, and that guy was at NYT, and he went off and um, and got the money for that. But then he came back to Christy, what should I do? This is gonna take forever, and it's probably we make so many mistakes, and I can't find enough people. And Christine said, after getting ripped off so many, I mean, she should have made zillions just on the algorithm she wrote to make, because especially why they have Pixar's little logo as you know the robot of the lamp is because it's a single algorithm that can move an object in any direction 360 in 3 dimensions on a two-dimensional plane, right? And that was the big tough thing for computer graphics. And Radetcha kind of got over, it was a Rube Goldberg thing because it was analog, right? And so it was like pasting the pictures. It took each digital image and it's like doing animation with Gumby, but analog, electronically. And so it was a synthesizer. So, and ABC bought it for a couple $1 million so they could do their logo, right? And it looked very clunky. And Christine wrote that algorithm, and that's all computer graphics is based on. She didn't get a nickel. She got her PhD. She got a lot of cred. She got, the little pin to get into the IEEE. She then was invited to go teach at this school. That then these other people said, well, why don't we just cut some of this goal off and move it into this real. We're building a place called CW. She was kind of at CW post college, and then they got some more real estate with a big, beautiful mansion, and they made that NYT, and it was in a much prettier place, right? So she went over there and did that, and that's when she met the moron who got the $1 billion to make the the genetic model, and she invented everything for it. But she said, I will do this, I will do all of this, and I will get by using my technology, you will be able to map the genome in maybe a year, not 20 years, right? And you will succeed, right? I will build this stuff, and I will, first of all, you need to give me 500,000 in cash, and leave me alone. And so she went back to NYT, got herself, a place that had security and no one could steal her shit, and she did it. Right? And when I get it done and I show you my results, I will then sell you the equipment for $5 million. Right? And she got that because she built all the shit for GE when I knew her, and they were just screwing her, right? And screwing with her head, with her everything, making her miss. The only thing that made her, you know, right. So she started working for GE. She started doing this, digitizing their everything. She had to go up against the unions and the this and all these boys who did shit like put crap in her desk drawer. I mean, really terrible things. And that's about when I met her, right? And she was, being philosophic. There were all these people in this. I went to this party, and there were all these young, people like Musk. Came from rich families, blah blah blah. They went to Yale, they went to Harvard, they went to MIT. They're going to be the next Bill Gates, blah blah blah. And Bill Gates, this is in the '80s. Bill was he was the first of the poster boys, but not really. Anyway, so we're at this party, and they were all boring. They hadn't read anything. They didn't know anything. Daddy was rich. They went to a good school. They could just mouth off what was, the thing that the corporate guys had no idea about. Oh, we're going to, expand your commodity, blah blah blah. And Christine was like sitting over there, leaning, and I knew she liked pot. And she looked at me, and she didn't really quite recognize me. And she was totally different. She was no longer this little girl with pigtails, brilliant genius. Christine was like the white version of that Akanda, the black country, and the king's sister was the brilliant scientist. That was Christine, but white, right? And and real white, and came from a kind of family, dumb, not educated, not just up, just a little that much above um, lower middle class, right? And she was a genius from birth, and so people realized that, so she went, instead of going to the crappy school, they put her into a pretty good school. Instead of going to crap middle school, they put her into a private school. Not her parents. These people said, we're going to educate your daughter, and they kept doing it. She got into Stanford when she was like, I mean, she was at Stanford PhD program when she was like 17, right? And that's when she wrote that algorithm. And that's she was part of Xerox PARC, and I was there at that time, so I met her and Louise, and Louise was just a trip, just wild, crazy animal, right, and brilliant, and Christine's best buddy, and Christine was and Louise, what I say, Christine's the smartest human being on the world, I think, ever. I'm smart, you're smart, but and we were a little older than Christine, and so she was very shy. And we would go out and do stuff, but we were like the three amigos. Christine and I didn't quite. I mean, we kind of sparked in a sweet way. And I'm a guy who doesn't push on women, right? I am not a misogynist, right? I wait till a woman pushes on me. When a woman's totally like jumping on my bones, I say, "Okay, let's do it." But I let the woman make the first move, right? And so Christine was, we were more about her, ideas and stuff, and especially at Xerox Park was like a wonderland. That was the first campus. That was, in Grandpa Xerox. He's like the man who fell from. Did you ever see David Bowie in Man Who Fell to Earth? That was Grandpa Xerox, right? He just invented the Xerox machine because during World War II they couldn't do blueprints. They couldn't do mimeographs yet. It was just too much. So he invented the first Xerox machine then, right? And made it so it was pretty transportable. It wasn't like the size of a house. It was like more like the size of what a Xerox machine is. And so I met him in the 60s because I worked in a foundry and they had one of their machines that did blueprints and never really worked. So he never paid the bill. He never let Xerox come and get it. They were in a wrangle. They said, okay, you got somebody who's, smart enough to fix these machines. And they're Janie Poo. University Rescue written permission today. Yeah, still do. They still do that. I mean, that's what I was talking about earlier in the show about corporations. You have to realize at every school, every nonprofit, Goodwill, United Way, they're all corporations. They are just a scam of a element of that corporate, of that, unipolar, transnational, fascist oligarchy. All of that. Right? It's to control a population. That's what all these mechanisms are. That's what universities are, colleges are, public education is, right? It's to control. Even I went to the best universities, best schools, best prep schools on the planet. I was being sculpted to be a rocket scientist for the Pope, you know, and I just went along to get along because I was enjoying the access to the shit I was getting access to, right? And so it was better than being murdered by a nun in kindergarten, in first grade. And even though I was saved by the bell by the cardinal, it's still I could tell that I was just being controlled. Whereas most people who are being controlled are basically just oblivious to that control, right? So anyway, I'm at this party maybe let's see, about 8 years from when I was 6 years, about 8 years from when I first met um, Christine, right? And she was over in the corner, and she wasn't doing this stupid crap that all these other morons who were trying to show off, tell how smart they were, that they were going to be the next, they're going to make the next big thing, right? They're going to be the next. And Grandpa Xerox went to California to Stanford there, not as a student. We had zillions of dollars, but most of what is now known as Silicon Valley, it was all farmland. He bought it all, right? And he built his own campus. He was the first, like Google and Apple and all those. Before any of that, he built it, his Xerox Park. And he had people like Wozniak and a few other folks like that who were really making stuff. Not Jobs made nothing. Jobs was just a guy who could wear a turtleneck and was thin, and he had kind of a magnetism, and he was bred to be what he was and to die when he they had a kill date on him, right? So he died of cancer of that, right? And I met all those guys. I saw what this was, and what happened was, OS. Grandpa, Xerox made OS, software, a, graphically um, run system. Because back when I first learned computers back in 1963, freshman in high school, we had to we had to sit at this stupid thing, and our we had to have like a stack of printed cards like that, like to make the computer to shift. You had to have like 1,000 cards, right? It was like the most tedious, and then you had to put in this machine that would collate all these things. And if one of those cards was bent a little bit, it would shoot the 20,000 cards all over the room. You know, after I spent like 1 month writing a little bit of code, and I put it amongst, and we were doing it as a team. Um, and I put my 800 cards into the stack of like 20,000 that the other me and 10 other guys did, and we were and I was a freshman. These old guys were like juniors. I was taking physics when I was freshman, the senior course, right? And because I already knew physics, I could already do trigonometry. These guys having a hard time with trigonometry with their slide rule. I said, glad these, you don't have to do that. Anyway, and my teachers, I had a great physics teacher. I had a great computer science teacher. I didn't even call it then. But this guy was the boyfriend of touring in England, and he was a Catholic priest, right? Um, and he was great. He was a griot. He just told stories about touring in World War II, and then what he did in Los Alamos and in New Mexico with the Nazis in their missile range, right? So Christine and I, as a couple, were like a culmination of all this crazy shit, right? She had been at, but she's like, this her best friend would say she's the smartest human probably ever. Christine Barton, go look her up. And so when she was at GE at the RCA building, NBC, that's where they had put her, right? Because that's where all the fiber optics was going in and out of, and GE was definitely, instead of putting out there in Boise or someplace, they put her there, right? That's where the corporate head was, blah blah blah. And so she's doing this project, and so she's really doing what is going to be used now and into the future. She was doing it back in 70, was that? I guess that was 80. Second time I met her was 82 or 3, right? Just after I had divorced Don, and I was like having lots of girlfriends. That's like that period. I was running. I built a lot of clubs. I built a lot of restaurants, and to keep the inspectors away, I kept coming once a week to make sure there wasn't an exit sign out or the this out or the that out. And I don't know if you've ever noticed on an elevator, it's usually right above the push buttons. There's this little thing that has a card in it. It's got dates on it and a signature. Elevators are a very dangerous machine. And so to make them ubiquitous, part of the laws of every municipality says these things have to be inspected at least once a month, if not 3 or 4 times. And so there's this card, right? So I took that same idea, and right next to the fire inspection card, which is another thing that the fire inspectors come and make sure that, you know, the fire exits work and no one is putting stuff in front of them and blah, blah, blah. Right. And right next to it, I made my own little frame with a card, and I took my electrician's license and I made a Xerox of that. And then I took a little, where it said the stamp of the city and the state, and, you know, and what rank I had and all of that kind of stuff. Underneath that is a space where every year you go and pay the municipality $50. And it's really interesting. The higher your level of your license, the less you pay. There's different levels. Anyway, so I was a master, right? So I paid, at least in those days, I don't know what it is now, but I paid $50 a year, right? So there's a space on your license where they have spaces where it shows that you paid that year, and right, and you're supposed to keep your license in your office, right? So I took that license, I Xeroxed it, and I space it. That I put this other thing where I put dates of inspection of this, you know, um, the address of what that facility was. I stated what the facility was and who owned it and all of that. And then there's this other section at the bottom of my license that shows that you're in good standing, right? And so I would, it's this date, and I'd sign it. And on my license, there's where it says I'm a master electrician and good standing for this year. And then I sign over there, so they could see that signature, that signature. I'm I'm the highest level electrician engineer that the state and city is like saying this guy knows what he's doing. And so that was my way to get the inspectors off the backs of the places that I work for. So all these clubs, fancy restaurants, all of this stuff, I didn't have to wait on any line. I didn't have to stand in any satin rope place. I didn't have to be, in a special, the really important people up here, and the rest, I just walk in dressed, and sorry, we have a dress code. I was the dude. And that's where I got the dude nickname, because every time I'd walk into one, hey dude, how you doing? So that's at the time I was at this, right? So and from the time I divorced Don until I met Christine, which was maybe 6 month period, I probably had either 1 or 5 women every night. And this was also a time when AIDS was still an issue, not like it was in the 70s when no one knew what it was. They knew what it was, they knew what caused it, they knew how to protect yourself, and they were working on drugs to stop it, right? So they were in that march. So pretty much, if you weren't a homosexual butt fucking someone, um, you were pretty safe again, right? If you were a male heterosexual and you were having sex with a woman, it was a lot harder for the guy to get AIDS from the woman than it was for the woman to get AIDS from the guy, because the guy was shooting something, right? So if you wore a condom, not a problem. There were a number of things I could physically look at a person and say, their immune system is compromised. Well, I'm not going to stick it in there. We'll kiss, we'll pet, we'll fool around, but We're not going there. So just like I knew how to not get a girl pregnant. My blood, I have a certain blood type that my little swimmers, my little sperm cells, don't like my nuts being cold, right? So I don't wear underpants. I let them hang, right? And that's enough of a temperature uncomfortable that it lowers my sperm modality down to 92%. Right now, if my blood was different, where it liked my swimmers liked it to be cold, then I'd have to wear tidy whites, right? But if I did that, I would, you know, knock my sperm modality down within the 90s range, right? And that pretty much makes you impotent, right? Then the other thing is when girls, they have a cycle. You're hanging out with a girl in a regular thing, and you have a calendar, and you note when she had her period first, and then start figuring out her cycle. Pretty much, you have at least 14 to 20 days that you can screw happily ever after, and then there's about 7 to 12 days where you got to be a little more, you not do that, do other stuff, right? And then the other third thing is when women are ovulating, they have a discharge. So if you're down there lapping away, making a girl happy with something other than your unit, you can just stick your finger in there and do this. And if there's a little mucus that makes a little string, you know not to stick your unit in there. Right? So you got three things, and it doesn't take women to get a piece of apparatus stuck in their uterus or take a drug that will screw them up for life or any of the other things, right? The diaphragm, the sponge, none of that stuff. And those things you can still get pregnant, right? But if the guy takes the responsibility, which he should, um, you know, and so those three, the calendar, the mucus, whatever underpants you wear, and if you really want to be totally safe, you put on a raincoat. Because some people, I had a girlfriend who was so amazingly good at putting on the raincoat. It was part of our sex, right? We would, fool around, we'd kiss, we'd pet, we'd rub, we'd take a shower, we'd do all kinds of fun things. Um, And then when we were getting down to it, we would get seriously down. I would turn into a lesbian and she would get out the raincoat, right? And she was so good at getting Stan to stand at attention. Um, and then she'd put on the raincoat and we'd go at it, right? And she did other little things that kept Stan happy because Stan didn't like the raincoat. But she did things to make not even notice he was wearing a raincoat. So, and this is what life's about. You can deal with every issue in a pretty good way. No big deal, no harms, no foul. Whereas, the unmentionable one is the perfect example of the person who does everything he can to be miserable. And that's what kind of the human race does. We don't need to have war. We don't need to have famine. We don't need to have pestilence. These are all manufactured. Yes, they kind of happen in um, nature, but not in the way that we experience them, right? Half the world up until 1492 was pretty much indigenous people. They had no record of any of this. They had no war. Yeah, people got pissed off. They killed each other. They had no war. They didn't mass wipe out whole races and cultures of people. That's war. Read, you know, Mein Kampf 1 and 2. Adolf Hitler didn't write those, but they are it's like Marx's Das Kapital. It was the statement, mission statement of the unipolar transnational fascist state. You know, that those two books and the works of Benito Mussolini, because he coined a phrase. He was really an economist, right? So we have this great opportunity right now. We are in these next between now, here it is, 2022, but going to be 2023, right? between 23 and 33 is this unbelievably amazing period when we can bring peace on earth, goodwill to man, right? And if we continue to do what we're doing right now, because why things are so strange, so weird, so wacko, is because we're pushing up against the stream, right? And the stream, once it becomes a flood, it'll wash this away. But when it washes this away, it will be what Noah experienced, right? It doesn't have to be that. Right? So we got these 10 years, from 23 to 33, and there are a group of people who are obviously trying to do it, right? And the next, between now and 2025 will be a real marker because we've already gotten right up our tippy toes on the cliff of um, of the seesaw. And once the seesaw tips the other way, well, it'll be a lot harder to get to balance, right? But we have between now and 2025 to really start, working to bring peace on earth, goodwill to man by 2033. But if we keep doing the same stupid shit we're doing now, things will continually to get warmer and crazier and whacked out. And if we continue and have wars, because this war is making, the war in Russia and Ukraine are making the biggest, carbon footprint that, we could ever imagine. If we keep doing things like building, great elephant edifices like Qatar did for the World Cup, that cost 6,000 people to die. We keep doing things like that just for petty ego and there is no real profit in petty ego, even though it's sold on these, wheeling wheel of the stock market. I mean, stock market is just a gambling casino. So, and this thing with Bitcoin shows that that's a digitized casino. Anyway, so as long as if we keep going in that direction, but 2012 is when the Piscean age ended. It's the end of the Mayan calendar. That was the Piscean age. And we are now 100% into the Aquarian age, right? But there's an inertia here, right? Of all of that shit we've done for the last 6 million years, right? And we're coming to this, we very easily, next, between now and 2025, do our best. We don't have to be miraculous, do our best to do better with the world. Stop having war. Stop spending 3/4 of our assets on building weapons. Start, if we gave Ukraine almost $250 billion worth of war materials and investment, right? And about a third of it didn't even make it there. It's going to other countries to have wars in other places, right? And so that's a little two-step we learned with the Spanish American War. We went out into the Pacific, conquered everything. I mean, we were going to make um, what's that place right next to China, where Subic Bay is? We're going to make that an American state, like we made Hawaii an American state, and that's why Japan attacked us. We were coming for them, and they knew it. So, and we hooked them into that war, and we did to Japan what we did to Russia, and conversely, in Japan, there were character actors in, around the emperor who was telling them what, become military industrial entity. And they did by World War I. And they defeated Russia. Japan, from all the way over there, came into Russia's Pacific neck of the woods and defeated their navy, which is one of the military things that was like the first domino that caused the Russian Revolution. Meaning, the revolution didn't happen until things were just falling apart left and right, right? And that's what's going to happen. And that's part of the Malthusian motif of problem, action, solution. I go into that place in the early '80s, and there's Christine looking like Lauren Bacall leaning against the thing. I go, wow, that is Christine. She is grown up. She is looking good. So I kind of mosey over to her, and she's looking at me like, who the fuck is this? He's sure none of these morons. He's kind of interesting. I go, hey, still like marijuana? And she didn't even catch that I said, still like marijuana. I think she just heard me say, do you like marijuana? And she goes, yeah. I said, well, this place, look over there. They have a really nice balcony. Why don't we go over there? It's overlooking, no one's out there. There's a door. We can go out. There's some nice furniture. It's relatively big. Let's get some food, some booze, go out there and talk, smoke. She goes, great idea. So we get ourselves our little plates of goodies and a nice cocktail, and we go out there, and no one's out there. I just kind of close the door, and the two little handles. I had a tie wrap in my pocket. I'm an electrician. I always have tie wraps, clippers, a tester, and a flashlight. Right. And with that, I can fix anything. Right. And sometimes, if I have a big enough pocket, a roll of duct tape. And I have this really special duct tape. Depending on how it's made, actually has metal in it, so it can be conductive. But I have this great duct tape that's black. It's like theater duct tape, and it's stronger, it's stickier, it works better, and it's non-conductive, and it's black. You can't see it. So I go up there. I didn't have the roll of tape with me. I had a tie wrap in my pocket, and I kind of put it on there so you couldn't open the door, right? And she looks at this, looks at me, and because I'm looking for it, I only have like one tie wrap in there. So I think I have a tie wrap in here. I take out the flashlight, take out the tester, take out my clippers, and my screwdriver, my Swiss. It's way better than a Swiss knife. And oh look, tie wrap. Something zip. She's like, and I put the stuff in my pocket, and I pull out a cigarette pack, and it's all marijuana cigarettes. I have a rolling machine. I have a neighbor that has a lot of good herb. He just kind of gives it to me. And so, because I put in a surveillance system for all of those folks, that was the Pearl Street Power Station. I lived on the top, and ground floor was off-track betting. Next floor was marijuana. Next floor was cocaine. Next floor was heroin, and there was me. Anyway, so we were talking, we're eating. And I said, Christine, you know me, and she looks at me and she goes, Al, is that you, Al? Because I had a big, pretty much big beard. When I was in California, I had really long hair with a beautiful, like I looked like a Native American that was, I looked like an Iroquois. They're 100% Iroquois, but they got Dutch in them, so they all got blonde hair, blue eyes, and look like white boys. But they're, Grandpa David and his son David Yarrow were chiefs of the Iroquois Nation, and they looked as Dutch as you could get. So anyway, Christine is, wow, isn't this great? 8 years, yeah, I guess it was eight. She said, 8 years later, and here you are. I said, and boy, look at you. You're no longer that youngster. And she goes, yeah, I'm no longer that youngster. I've learned a lot. And so I said, well, tell me about you. Right. So she gives me the whole story about, every different entity that has taken advantage of her. And as she's been doing that, they don't really screw her like throw away because they need her. So they just take advantage of her. Right. And so it's like she's being educated on the corporate ways and means of things. Right. And so she's gone through three or four of those iterations, and she left she got sick of California. This is when California was still like, "Ooh, wow, the best place to be." She got sick of it, and she got this alternative, thing. They gave her a chunk of change to come to New York, and a chunk of change to start her program, and a nice hefty budget, which she put in her own pocket. I mean, other than what she got as hardware, she didn't hire anyone. She tried to get the people who worked there who call themselves computer engineers, and they were worthless. So she did everything herself. So we had this great conversation. I said, so let's go have some fun. And she goes, "Oh, wow, I haven't had fun since I last saw you 8 years ago." And she goes, "I tried, but everyone did drugs, everyone was drunk, everyone was this, everyone was that, everyone had diseases, and I just had to, say no to the human race." So So anyway, we walked out arm in arm, and everyone just kind of stopped talking and watched us walk out because everyone knew that she was the smartest person in the world, right? They were pretending to know what they were doing, but they all had something to do with her, so they knew who she was like it, right? She was the it girl in computers and especially in computer graphics. So um Louise. I said, "Where's Louise?" Oh, she's addicted to LA. She won't leave. She's in the movie business now, and she went into Pixar, into one, then into Lucas. She helped Lucas, make his Industrial Light Magic and blah blah blah. I said, "Oh, okay." So what you? And so she's telling me her whole thing. So we go down. Um, it's like near Central Park. So we go over to the really fancy schmancy restaurant. That's I forget what it's called, but it's like unless you have a reservation, like a year and a half, and you're a Duke or Earl or John D. Rockefeller, you can't get in that place, right? Well, I lit that place, right? And so I walk in, and Mater D. Murray's there. Murray, got my table, and he goes, "Of course." And he'd always call me, the doctor. Of course, doctor, we have your table. And it was straight out of the scene from The Wise Guys. This is like platform where there are these banquettes that people sit at, so they can have privacy. And this is kind of corner over here where they have the thing for the napkins and the silverware and the coffee machine and all that. And it's on wheels, right? And it's right in front of a view of where the lake is and off into the Great Meadow. I mean, it's a great view. You'd think you'd put a table there for this amazing view. But no, they got this thing with a coffee machine and all that because all these banquettes kind of have that great view, but they're not right there. They're kind of up on this thing. But it's so everyone can see. And this thing's over here keeping anything getting in the way. So as I'm talking to Murray, and he tells Pierre to get my table ready. I look over there, and where that wheelie thing is, they kind of wheel it off into a hallway. Unplug the coffee machine, which I put the plug there for, and they rolled it over there, and they just carried in the table, put it there, put the tablecloth on, the light, the 19 knives, forks, and spoons, and the 6 different kinds of crystal glass, and these really, really, really nice chairs that were like king chairs, really high, really cushy, really thin, and on wheels, right? And you could wheel wherever you wanted to go. And once you got there, you kind of just set your butt down in the middle of the chair, and it locked the wheels, so it wouldn't go anywhere. And if you just lifted your butt, it unlocked, and you could roll around. So, they bring us over there, and they give us the menus, and he says, "Here's the specials, and if you would like, you could have the chef make this, this, and this, but it'll take a little while. So we will give you, whatever hors d'oeuvres, whatever salad, whatever fish or pasta you may want." This is like a 19-course place. You can get whatever you wanted on the menu. But if you want that special stuff, and only for really special people, and Chris goes, "Oh wow, I love this stuff." And he said, "Well, we can make it for you. You're with him, we'll make it for you. Do you know who you're with?" And she goes, "Oh, I know who I'm with." And so, we we had this amazing meal. And we just came from the morons up there, took the elevator down, went across, Fifth Avenue, went into the park, walked over to there, and went in there. And like I said, people are still waiting online to get in. And they have a reservation, right? And we just walked past all those people, and they were all wearing super fancy clothes. Christine was definitely dressed nice. Me, I was dressed like me. and they just, you know, hey Mary, how you doing? Oh, doctor, right? And most of the maitre d's call me doctor because for some reason that impresses the people around. Oh, he's a doctor, especially it looks like that. Anyway, so Christy and I have this great meal. We walk out. I've asked our waiter to ask Murray to go get us a carriage, and so you know we walk out. There's a carriage waiting for us. Quip, 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 quip. He goes, where do you want to go? I said, I want to go, up to 198th Street and Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard. He goes, you're going to the Magic Seven? And I go, yes, I am. He goes, well, I've never taken a horse there, but hey, it's a beautiful night. There's no traffic. Everyone's out of town. We'll just go through the park all the way up to the north end and then go across, you know, 8th Avenue and go up Eldridge all the way up to Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard. And I think that should be a pretty safe way to go. I said, sounds like a great idea. So clip, 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 clip. And, we're in the back there and we're nuzzling. And she goes, for all those, for that year and a half that we were the Three Musketeers, we never, ever had sex. I said, yep. And I said, well, she goes, well, you and Louise, and she was married. I said, well, that was a whole different story. Her husband would just kind of married Louise to, get proprietorial ownership of her brain, and he didn't care what the heck she did. And he was asexual, he was a reptile. And she laughed. And so we started smooching and kissing and still smoking. And I gave the guy goes, that smells good. And I said, here. So, and he kept blowing it on the horse, and the horse went, and we clip, clap, across Central, up all the way up Central Park, across end of 8th Avenue, up Lenox and into Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard. And we go to the Magic Seven, total black club. There's no white people at all, right? And there's no real, there's kind of a waiting line, but it's not. It's not like, around this corner. It's like, come up to the door, you knock on it, you give them the secret knock, and they open the door, and this big guy, who looks like he'd kill you 20 different ways, looks at you. And it's straight out of that scene with the guy was, sent to Earth, was with, what's his name, who did The Matrix, that guy. And he's guy who's always wearing black, and he kind of, he lives in a bowling alley, and, he's touched by God, and and he goes to this place it's a nightclub for angels and devils, right? And the guy would hold up a card, and you'd have to be able to see what the card is to get in, right? So it was almost like that, not quite, but almost. And you basically, you'd open up the door, and if you could tell who was playing the music, they'd let you in. So, and they had no advertisement. You didn't see in the paper, and playing tonight, right? Magic 7 did not exist, right? Just like this club in that movie didn't exist, right? Walk in, and everybody who was a real mover and shaker was in there, who's black, right? Or other non-white. This was not a place you would see really any whites. And because I wired it, because I knew the boys, the Greens, who started it, who basically ran that business up there, and I knew them from childhood. I know a lot of these guys from childhood, right? Ow! And he called me doctor. Ow! Guys come over, hug me, kiss me. Who is this beautiful girl? I said, not only is she beautiful, she is the smartest human on earth. That's how I would introduce Christine to people who knew me and didn't know her. Oh. And they turned to, and wouldn't make a crack like, what's he doing with you, honey? They would turn to her and say, oh, it's a great pleasure and honor to meet you. Understanding that you're with the right guy. There is no other guy for you other than this guy. And they'd laugh and pat us on the back. Anyway, so again, that place had our table waiting for us. Soon, and I knew the guy at the door. I didn't have to say who was playing. He was, oh Al, come on in. And he get on the intercom. Hey, Al's here. Get his table ready. And so, and you went past this big gigantic metal door into just a little cubby, and there was an elevator, and it was like the thing that wasn't an automatic elevator. You had to run it. And basically, a little gizmo that you did, you had to do like a stutter start to get the thing to move, right? And it was like looked like it was about to crash at any second, right? It was like a little bit of a scary ride before, and you went up, 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 and it was right on the top of the building, and um, the roof was also part of the club, right? And it had a roof over it. So where the dance floor was, it was like those two floors, and it had this beautiful staircase that went up there. And this was like, a speakeasy for white people back in the day. Big stage, you could have a gigantic band. And we came in, and it was really nice because my table was not out where people could see me. It was you went through the main thing, and then they had these like different stair steps, right? And in the back of where this place was, there was a whole bunch of these nice little, again, cubbies that had, a bench, not a bench, but a nice cushiony your table. And it's everyone sitting here. There are no chairs, so you can see the stage and everybody else. And you're in a darkish kind of thing, and there's a little candle burning the table, and that's the only kind of light. And they have like pools of light everywhere, but on that back tables, no. These were all people who didn't want to really be seen, and could see everything because everything got more and more illuminated as you went down to where the dance floor is, and the big staircase that went upstairs, which was where the dining room was, and you could go from your having your nice meal up there, and they had real good fancy southern food, right? Like New Orleans kind of food, and so that's where I take care of friend, with a horsey ride, from from the restaurant where we had dinner, horsey ride, clip, clap, clip, clap, all through the park, seeing all the beautiful things. He wound us through. We saw the big fountain. We saw the statue of Balto. We saw the zoo and the animals that you could see running around at night in the big cages. You could see them. You could hear the monkeys in the monkey house, and they were all screaming, "Ow, ow!" So. Um, so we spend the evening, and the sun is coming up, and a couple of made men who are black said, "You want to go to breakfast at Lenny's?" Sure. Lenny's was a place. Lenny's um, vegetable market, right on 8th Avenue, kind of right next to the bus terminal there on 8th Avenue, the Port Authority bus terminal. And it was kind of up where George Washington Bridge is, because they have exits off the George Washington Bridge that go right into the Port Authority bus terminal. And so, I mean, a little bit of a road. I mean, it's not right next to it's more down, almost not quite midtown, but Upper West Side, I would say, off 8th Avenue. And so, right on either side of the Port Authority, there are all these vegetable markets and food stores, right? They're all run by Italians, and basically, they're all the general public can buy apples and oranges off the things out there on the sidewalk. But to go in, you got to be a made person or know somebody made, right? And because they were like the target of mobster stuff. You could get guns, drugs, people, and any kind of food you want, right? And Lenny's had the best bakery. It's great. It was like all the time best breakfast you could ever have, right? eggs Benedicts, but instead of on ham, on lobster. Good, right? Um, the best instead of like bacon or sausage, the best steak that just you could cut with a butter knife and just put it in your mouth, and it would just ooze and dissolve, right? Which today that's kind of only steak I could eat. So anyway, we're ha- we're not having food. We gone to the club, listen to music, dance. I met a bunch of my friends and introduced her, and this is the smartest human, not woman, smartest human on earth. They would say, well, and they'd all say, well, you're with the right guy. And so we left there, and my friend, his limo was waiting for us, and we went to Lenny's and had breakfast. And again, that's when I saw some real Italian-made men, real the mobsters. And again, the mobster was still there in the '80s, early '80s. The corporate. We now have corporate mobsters, right? So that's the mobsters we have. So we have breakfast, and by the time we get out of there, it's maybe 7, and it's a Saturday, or it's a Sunday morning, and it's really very quiet. Nothing happens. Um, the lady who is the major domo of Lenny's, I think it was either his granddaughter. I think it's his granddaughter because she was relatively, in her 30s, our age. Anyway, so she packed up a box of yummies, pastries, a bag of really, still warm bagels, and smears, salmon and cream cheese with stuff in it, and a big thermos of coffee. She goes, "This is, you can go home now and kick back, and you can nosh on this the rest of Sunday." And this is my life. This is what I did for 60. When did I die? How old was I? I was 60. Let's see, 14. I'm 64 when I died. But that's the life I lived, right? The last 10 was like, whoa, way off the hook of what I was doing, because I was still running jobs and running around and carrying things, and still working out, still doing my katas, still being the adept I was. And which keeps you, when your energy levels are certain, you could eat anything. It's like my master, right? He drank a whole bottle of ammonia just to show that kids, you don't do this at home, but this is to show you that the world you live in is an illusion. And when you are of an energetic type, you can do anything. So, back when I started this 2 hours and 28 minutes ago and 28 seconds, before I did it, I put myself in a shamanic state. So, have you guys felt any interestingness about how you're perceiving this show? Right? And I have jumped all over the universe. I really. And have you understood the shamanic thread that connects all of these stories as one? Right. The name of this is, the old crone, Al, and my master, Archie, were on the bop. So we're on the bop. And the whole time that I saw Christine and there's Fish, there's Jane. Who else is here? Let's see. Sandra. Oh, we've had some Is whatever, whatever that is. Hi. What what are your thoughts on Ukraine? Okay, I kind of told you that one. Uh, Jess, love you. Can you please give a shout out to Lisa? She's the light of my life. Lisa, this is more than a shout out. Even if you've left the show, Lisa, you're feeling this. You're experiencing the totality of this story at that moment. And the rest of you went along for the ride. So there, Jess, I gave Lisa more than a shout out. A lot. Yeah, well, there you go. In the end, love is all there is. That's right, buddy. And you're living it. You're living the dream, Jess. Just do your best. You don't have to be perfect. Do your best. Most people screw up by trying to be perfect. Sandra, there's Jane. Good afternoon. What do you think about the first fusion technology? That is such boil horseshit. To make fusion, make sun on Earth. Good idea. I don't think so. I mean, look, our nuclear uranium reactors burn at 4,200 degrees, right? What is fusion? What is the sun? Like a zillion degrees, right? And so the Russians came up with this idea of the tokamak, an electromagnetic thing, a bottle to keep um, the, essence of fusion, ether, from expanding and consuming the whole planet. And so that didn't work. And so they tried lasers, and you got to put so much in it. So they had to put in 35 times the amount of energy that they got out just to break even for a nanosecond. So that means you would have to to do this to just make heat to boil water. Why do nuclear reactor? Why do you need 4,200 degrees to get 400 degrees to boil water? As steam to run a turbine, and you don't, right? Back when they invented, Fermi had the first pile. The Germans were playing around with heavy water and made this thing called oh, instead of uranium, it starts with a T. It's basically seawater, right? And they could get a nuclear reaction that cooked at around not thermite, not taco mac, but it'll pop into my mind. But it cooks at about 500 degrees, right? And they don't need any mediator. They don't need to pump billions of gallons of water over the core. No, they make the material into these like pebbles, and they stack them with airspace between them. And the nuclear reaction occurs. It heats those little stones up, and they take that hot the air they're pushing through, and on the other side of that, they have a heat exchange, and the heat exchange turns water into steam. The steam turns electric turbine. Now, that's why France has 80% of its electricity running on these nuclear power, but they are not uranium. They are this thermite. No, what is it called? It'll pop into my mind. I'll remember it tonight trying to go to sleep. Anyway, there's that. But before all of that, before Madame Curie, who is really the mama of all of this, she's like, the mother of invention. She really invented all this, right? And her husband, they gave him the Nobel Prize. Said, "Fuck you guys, I'm not getting this unless you give it to her." And so they did. And then she kind of died because she was hands down the person who was really doing it, and so she got irradiated playing with radium. So anyway, um, Tesla. on the other hand, he built Wardenclyffes, right? And so that was an industrial apparatus that showed that we can do this because he went off to Colorado Springs and did his experiments there because they're very active. It's one of the places that gets hit by lightning the most. And why does that happen? Because in the mountains up near Colorado Springs, there are caves. And those caves are the residue of super advanced civilizations. And Tesla went into, the Indians said, oh, don't go in there, bad spirits. So the white people didn't go in there. Tesla went in there and found all this technology, took it back to his laboratory. He found one of the first, the Catholic Church had found the first looking glass, but he found one, which gave him an ability to communicate through the ether to other dimensions of people of these higher technologies. That gave birth to us, right? And so that's where he realized, and understood and did his experiments and created 0 point energy, right? And 0 point energy, the simplest way, and I used to, I've done experiments like this a number of times. And I had friends, when I was part of the U.S. Cyclotronic Society, and we had our little laboratory out in Long Island near Islip, and Preston Nichols was part of Al Bielek, Duncan, um, there are four other guys that their names slip my mind, but those guys have been, I don't really use people's names unless they're in public domain, right? So um, we had quite an interesting little crew, and we were playing around with all, U.S. Cyclotronic Society was an entity that kind of mixed paranormal stuff, and it was like the opening of the X Files, where it says paranormal, flying saucers, time travel. That's what we were playing with, right? And all those guys worked for people like Sperry and for Grumman and for United Technologies, and they were all mind wiped. Meaning, that TV show that's now there where the people go to work and they can't remember their family or anything. That's not outside the gate, but when they're at work, that's all they know. And then when they leave work, they leave the gate. They don't remember anything from work. Well, that's where this came from. That has been a part of the military industrial complex for at least 100 years, right? In some fashion or another. It's called mind wipe. And that's why they can send millions of people out into space in, the dynamic of solar warden and go to other solar systems. I mean, we're part of, when Roddenberry put us in we were already in the Federation, when they had Michael Rennie do, the day the Earth stood still. That already happened. These are all things that have happened, are part of it, but it's this kind of push me, pull you conflict between the dynamics of what made humans humans. That here's the good you. There's that cartoon where the angels on one shoulder, the devil's on the other. That's us. That's what we were created to be, to work out, to be. Why do we have the Van Allen belt around us, a radiation belt that you really can't get through, right? And so, going to the moon in the way that they advertised it, didn't happen. But going to it like in a Star Trek device, they already had those, right? The Germans found a bunch of them in the South Pole. That's where Schroedensliden is, right? And they're still there. All of the Antarctica is, a Hail Hydra facility, with probably about 1 million people there, right? That's why in Tasmania, Australia, you will find a hydroelectric plant that flooded the Gordon Ridge, which had the Hume pines, oldest living creatures on Earth, and this unipolar transnational corporate fascist state built a dam, flooded the whole thing because it was a rainforest. It rained and rained and rained and rained. And so it filled up. And I was sent there. I worked for a company and I was their punch list guy. And they were having a hard time getting paid their last thing because these guys wouldn't sign off on the punch list. And so they sent me there, and I was wearing a dress, and I had a handbag and high heels, but I had all the right clearances, and I was an electrical engineer. I could go toe to toe with those guys, and they were really upset. And I wasn't a lesbian or anything. I was an actor wearing a dress because it upset these guys to no end. And I kept asking them questions about themselves, and it was just to get rid of me. Okay, well, sign a stupid fucking get out. And then my boss would get the $2 million check, and he'd give me like $20,000, $30,000 just for having a nice little weekend. And I did that for him for about 5, 6 times in 3 years I was in Australia. This was the last time, and he gave me about 5 grand a month. So no matter what I was doing in Australia, whether I had a job, didn't have a job, get paid, didn't get paid, I'd at least have. And in 1977, having 5 grand a month, but not having just an envelope with cash in it was not that bad, right? And anything I needed or want, hey, I need a car, have a car. I need to see a doctor, I see a doctor. Whatever I needed other than that, and at least once a month I would go, not just to get the check. We'd go out on the town. We'd get in this plane, we'd fly to wherever, Thailand, whatever, have dinner. And so that's the life I've lived my whole friggin' life. And I didn't even try. I didn't do anything. I was just a dude. I was just a doctor. I was the kid. I was, me. And you can have the same life, not that same life, but a life that has been meant for you by just doing your best. That's all you got to do. And our friends there, Lisa and Dr. J, there, her boyfriend, they are entering into that parameter because, as he quoted, love is all you need, right? Love is all that exists. Everything else is an illusion. So if you're in love with someone, if you're loving someone, if you are in a loving relationship with a bunch of people, because my favorite form of love is platonic love. That's why I do this. I'm expressing my love for all of you guys every time I come on the YouTube. And you guys, hey, how you doing? Say, we have a nice chat. And a lot of you get a hold of me at the dudewake42@gmail, dudewake42@gmail, dudewake42@gmail. And a lot of you understand that we do live in a material world, and I have virtually nothing, which is fine. Actually, it's great to have nothing, and that when you have nothing, you have nothing to lose. And I'm always being taken care of. But it would be nice if some of you sent something into the old PayPal account, right? This is Christmas. Come on. I'm wearing red pants. Come on. I'm wearing a funny hat for you. Come on. Throw something in the old PayPal. Oh, look at that. I love it when that happens. 2 hours, 42 minutes, and 42 seconds. So, what time is it and how much juice do we got left? Ooh, I'm down to 44%. I'm down to 4%. I got to go. I'll talk to you later. I always seem to.